I welcome all the participants of our forum and our session. The second session, Green Growth Forum 2021, and the topic of our forum, Kazakhstan. The mobilization of financing and fiscal policy for carbon neutral Kazakhstan. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev took the responsibilities in order to achieve carbon neutrality up to 2060. And indeed, it's not the unique decision because the country joins to the global race in order to achieve a global carbon neutrality, in the framework of which we combat with the negative consequences for the whole nature and environment. And finances plays a very important role. For example, green bonds, they amounted more than 3 billion, and many corporations announced about their carbon neutrality. And the main message of our forum, in particular our session, is what the benefit that can be provided by the government and civil societies in the implementation of this objective via fiscal and financial instruments. In this session, we will speak about the role of the state in the fiscal policy, the financial part of this topic. Among the speakers, let me introduce the speakers of our session. They are Dr. Ma Jun, the chairman of the Committee on Green Financial of China, the founder and president of Institute of Finance and Sustainable Development, one of the leading specialists in green finances. From 2018 to 2020, he used to be the director of the Center of Financing and Development in Xinhua, who published a lot of books in this topic on monetary policy, sustainable development, and finances. And also among our speakers, Kumi Kitamori, the head of the division of Green Growth and Global Connections of the Directorate on the Environment OECD. She is a curator of the Green Growth and different committees on environment OECD, and she cooperates with different countries on this topic. She has the bachelor's degree in London's School of Economy and University, and also among our speakers, Alibek Kuantyrov, the Vice Minister of the Republic of Kazakhstan that deals with the strategic documents in the direction of green finances. And the next speaker is Aidar Kazybayev, Director General of the Center of Green Finances, International AFC, and it's the platform that the capital is proud of. He has big plans in financial technologies, including green ones, and the partner of legal company Zhanar, Abdullayeva, MNK partner, experienced speaker who has the experience in oil and gas and mining sectors, and she will share with her expertise and perspectives in green finances, in particular in mining metallurgical sector. And first of all, we will listen to all the speakers, and after that we will come to the Q&A session. Please, the first with welcoming speech will be Dr. Ma Jun. Please, could you please turn on his video?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank AIFC for inviting me to join this forum on architecture of green growth. It's my honor and pleasure to be part of this very important discussion. In the coming 10 minutes or so, I'd like to say a few words on how China is beginning to implement its carbon neutrality goals, how green finance is being advanced for this agenda, and I give you some update on the international initiatives that China has participated in. And finally, I will say a few words on green finance opportunities in Kazakhstan. Now, starting with the Chinese carbon neutrality goal, as you know, our president announced this target in September last year. And after the announcement, many sectors, provinces, large companies, and financial institutions are beginning to develop their roadmaps for implementation. For example, in the energy sector, several largest power companies have announced that they would achieve 75% renewables by 2030, and a few major energy companies are already contemplating carbon neutrality by 2050. Some provinces have also begun to develop their roadmap for carbon neutrality. For example, my team has helped the Chongqing municipality, which is the provincial level government, to complete its roadmap study. And this study will be published very soon. My team is also working on similar roadmaps for Nanping municipality of Fujian province, Kaihua County of Zhejiang province, and the Yuhang district of Hangzhou municipality. Many local governments, especially in coastal areas, demonstrated a very strong enthusiasm in greening their economies and introducing new technologies for decarbonization. And some governments have begun to plan zero carbon communities in which all buildings, transport facilities, and energy facilities are meeting standards of net zero. And the National Institute of Construction Science has launched a task force in developing net zero building standards in China. And I'm serving as an advisor to this task force. In terms of green finance in China, as you know, we have developed a framework for green finance in the past few years, which now includes a few key elements such as taxonomies, disclosure requirements, incentives, and products. On the product side, we have now 13 trillion RMB worth of green loans, 1.3 trillion RMB worth of green bonds, and 700 green funds, mostly PE and VC funds. And starting from beginning of this year, the PBOC is now working on an updated version of the green finance guidelines, which will take into account the requirements from carbon neutrality. And I expect 4 areas of improvement in our green financial system to make it more aligned with the Paris Agreement goal. Number 1 is the revision of taxonomies. For example, the PBOC new taxonomy on green bond has removed clean coal technology. And I think other taxonomies, such as those for green loans and green investment projects, will also make similar adjustments. And secondly, on disclosure, we're going to implement requirements for financial institutions to disclose carbon-related information, such as carbon footprint, and also disclosing brown assets information. On the incentive side, we're expecting the PBOC to develop a larger green relending program and begin to evaluate green banking performance based on carbon-related information, and begin to explore the possibility of introducing low risk weights for green assets and introducing higher risk weights for brown assets. As for products, there's a lot of innovation going on, including the introduction of sustainability-linked loans and bonds, and development of the carbon market, and also the carbon futures markets. Just a few words on international collaboration. As you know, that China initiated this idea of G20 Green Finance Study Group as early as in 2016. And I had the honor to co-chair the study group together with our UK colleagues during 2016 and 2018. And that study group successfully facilitated this formation of global consensus on scaling up green finance. And this year, under the Italian presidency of the G20, the study group was relaunched, and it's upgraded to a G20 System of Finance working group, which will have a higher profile in making recommendations on system of finance for G20 and for international organizations. And this year, the study, actually now it's called working group, is co-chaired by China and the US. I once again represent China to co-chair this working group together with colleagues from the US Treasury. And they will be working on 4 agenda items for this year under the G20 working group. One is to develop a G20 System of Finance roadmap, which will guide the work of G20 for the coming 5 years. And secondly, looking for options to improve convergence on alignment approach, including taxonomies, ESG rating methodologies, and verification approaches. And also, we will be working on ways to improve consistency of sustainability reporting standards. And finally, looking at the possibility of enhancing the role of NDBs in supporting the Paris Agreement The other initiative I'd like to mention is NGFS, which is called the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System. Under that network, I was serving as chair of the supervision group in the first 2 years. And during these years, I led the drafting of 2 environmental risk analysis documents, one of which is 600-page long. It's called Occasional Paper on Environmental Risk Analysis Methodologies, published in September last year. And that document consolidated more than 30 methodologies and tools from different countries' institutions on how to quantify the financial risks arising from environmental and climate exposure. And now it's been widely disseminated, and I'm hoping that investors and financial institutions in Kazakhstan can also take a look at these methodologies. And this year, I'm serving as the chair of the research workstream under NGFS, which has launched a new study called Biodiversity and Financial Stability in conjunction with a research network called Inspire. And we're planning to publish this report in the beginning of next year, making recommendations for financial institutions, for regulators to guide their work on quantifying the impact of loss of biodiversity on financial stability. And one more initiative I'd like to mention is the Green Investment Principles for the Belt and Road, which was launched by China Green Finance Committee and City of London back nearly 3 years ago. And as of now, 39 large institutions globally have signed up to these principles. They're committed to make more green and low carbon investments in the Belt and Road region and reducing the exposure to brown and polluting assets. And I'm very glad to announce once again that the GIP has initiated a regional chapter for Central Asia, which is chaired by Mr. Yassin Anwar, former governor of State Bank of Pakistan, and is hosted by AIFC Center, Green Finance Center. And once again, I'd like to express my appreciation for AIFC for taking this important job in promoting GIP within the region. Now, finally, let me say a few words on green finance in Kazakhstan. I'm very pleased to know that Kazakhstan has recently declared its own carbon neutrality goal, which I think will give a huge boost to both demand and supply of green finance. In light of this trend, I'd like to suggest that the Kazakhstan authorities and AIFC take the opportunity to push for a few things. One is to develop a roadmap for decarbonization of major sectors in the country, including energy, transportation, building, and manufacturing. And secondly, estimated demand for green and sustainable finance arising from the decarbonization trend. And thirdly, develop a green financial system around the goal of carbon neutrality. Namely, the taxonomies need to be made in line with carbon neutrality, and disclosure requirements should include carbon-related information. And the financial institutions need to conduct analysis of transition risks, especially those assets which are high carbon and exposed to risks when the transition is taking place. And financial institutions need to develop financial products which are encouraging carbon reduction. And also there's an opportunity to develop a green and low carbon technology database, which will help matching tech companies with finance. And I think Kazakhstan can consider fully utilizing the GIP, the Green Investment Principles, and its regional chapter in Central Asia as a platform for attracting international capital, green technology, and talents. And my center, which is the Institute of Finance and Sustainability in Beijing, will be happy to provide assistance if necessary. So let me conclude now by thanking the organizer once again for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I wish the event a great success. Thank you.
Мы благодарим доктора Марджуна за его выступление.
We thank Mr. Marjun for his presentation. Dear ladies and gentlemen, in the window of translation, please ask the questions. So we will try to answer these questions in the end of the session. But if we do not have enough time, you will take these questions by email. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Kitamori. The question is, what are the main aspects of a fiscal reform that helps for transitioning economies to become more sustainable from carbon point of view? And did the program that helps for greener growth help for Central Asian and Caucasus countries to be closer to these initiatives connected with the impact on the environment? Please, Ms. Kitamori, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation for me to join this very important panel discussion. Well, the theme is the journey or transition to net zero. Currently, some 124 countries have announced their goal to shift to net carbon economy in the latter half of the century, and this represents some 70% of global GDP and CO2 emissions. So this is very encouraging. But translating these pledges into concrete and actionable policy reform is a challenge. So today in my intervention, I will focus on fiscal policies that underpin the transition to a net zero economy. And I will cover two areas. First is public spending on the recovery and stimulus spending in response to the COVID crisis. And second area will be on carbon pricing, which includes both the positive pricing in the form of energy or carbon taxes, and also negative carbon pricing, which is normally in the form of subsidies to fossil fuel production and consumption. Since there has been quite a lot of discourse and discussion in Kazakhstan already on carbon taxes and ETS, today my remark will focus on the negative pricing, which is fossil fuel subsidies. So I will try to share my slide with you. Let's see if that can, let's see. Do you see my slides? Okay, so let me put this in the presentation form. Here we go. So first, the stimulus spending in response to COVID crisis. Many governments have allocated very large sums of spending in response to the immediate health crisis, provide support to income and jobs, and also to kickstart the economy and stimulate investment. At the same time, governments have called for green recovery to build back better, and then to align these spendings also with the longer term goals for green recovery, green growth, and then for net zero economy. Now, OECD has been tracking these recovery related measures with environmental implications to assess the greenness of this public spending of the recovery measures in OECD and G20 countries. On the left, you see that there's the total funding allocated to measures categorized as positive for the environment versus those that are mixed or negative. Now, while some $236 billion have been allocated to green measures, the total is almost matched by to mixed or negative measures. Now, on the right, we estimate that green funding represents only about 17% of all recovery spending announced so far. So this gives an overall picture that despite the pledges to build back better, much more can be done if we want to align this kind of spending also for the net zero goal. Now, let me turn to the need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies, which is another important part of fiscal policy that is fundamental to achieving net zero. The G20 has declared fossil fuel subsidies as being fiscally wasteful and environmentally harmful. So phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, which is in effect a negative carbon pricing, should lie at the heart of any decarbonization strategy. So, and as we know, fossil subsidies distort allocation of capital across the economy and undermine renewable energy development and energy efficiency, and encourage higher energy consumption, leading to, of course, emissions and air pollution. And finally, fossil fuel subsidies are fiscally very costly. And they eat up public budgets that could otherwise be allocated for education, health, investment. Sorry? Okay, so I'm sorry. Yeah. It's not showing? You see my slides?
No, I can't see.
Yeah, others see the slides on the screen?
Yes, we can see it, but it doesn't rotate. It doesn't change.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Do you see this?
No.
But maybe.
Now I don't.
Okay, sorry about that. Maybe I can just simply try to go to the, in the interest of time. Let's hope the technology is with us now. So basically, OECD, it's one of the primary ambassador. We analyzed budgetary transfers, tax breaks, and spending programs linked to the production and consumption of of coal, oil and gas, and other petroleum products. And we cover currently 50 OECD and G20 economies. And this slide, which I hope is showing that total support to fossil fuels rose by 55% or so year to year to 2019. This actually reversed the 5-year trend that was going down, and we see a rise. So this should be of concern, as this is in contradiction to the net zero pledges that many governments have made. Did you see the slide that changed? Now I'm trying to show what's happening in Eastern European and Caucasus countries. But we also track such subsidies in Eastern Europe and Caucasus. Basically, and then we try to look at these amounts of estimated fossil fuel support as share of GDP compared to also public budget deficits or surplus. And if you can see this, you see, for example, a pretty dramatic situation in Ukraine, where fossil fuel subsidies amounted to nearly 2% of GDP in the year 2018, for example, when the budget deficit was 1.9%. So the support given to fossil fuel production and consumption was larger than the budget deficit that given year. So that is an illustration of it could be very costly to public budget. In Kazakhstan, we estimate that fossil fuel subsidy to be similar or possibly larger share of GDP. Now, just some concluding comments on Kazakhstan. We know that the country is at a very critical juncture at the moment with the updated NDC expected soon, and also the low emission development strategy nearly completed. So this should support this ambitious goal of carbon neutrality to be reached by 2060. This is very encouraging, but the low carbon transition requires a rethink in the wider structural reform agenda. In particular, this also needs a rethink in public budgeting and how to do this strategically so that we can mobilize and leverage more private finance to support the transition to net zero. And this is a common challenge, not just Kazakhstan, all countries share this. It is very difficult. And OECD is committed to provide support with the net zero objectives and policy reforms with Kazakhstan, as well as many other countries in Central Asia and more widely. So with that, I conclusion, that's the end of my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much, Madam Kitamori, for your interesting intervention. I fully concur and agree that we have to rethink our approaches in order to meet the objectives that we have set for ourselves. And that's why our next speaker will be Alibek Kuantyrov, because according to the United Nations, without carbon neutrality, you cannot reach sustainable development. And how sustainable development goals are being achieved in Kazakhstan in line of our commitments and our commitments to carbon neutrality by 2060, and our policy, how much does it dovetail with sustainable development and the UN Sustainable Development Agenda? You have 5 minutes as well.
The relevance of the session's topic reflects the versatility of the process that's taking place today under the influence of climate change challenges. And according to the WHO, the global temperatures rise and the number of fatalities and illnesses from heat stress, heart stroke, cardiovascular and kidney diseases increases. In addition to this, the corona crisis provoked some suspension of many industries, literally breaking the chains of added value and sales, as well as the collapse of entire industries and markets. So taking care of the future, many leading countries, corporations and investors have voluntarily announced the transition to carbon neutrality, as well as the abandonment of hydrocarbon-based energy sources and other active measures. And Kazakhstan doesn't stay away from these global trends. Our country is improving its national legislation on adaptation and reducing the risks of climate change, taking a number of measures in this direction. As you know, we are the largest landlocked country in the world, located in the region highly vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. And our economy is reliant on fossil fuel resources. And we clearly understand the importance of diversifying the economy and the need to reorient from our raw materials. The degraded land amounts to 1.8 million hectares. About 300,000 hectares are covered by vegetation due to afforestation efforts, and we are scaling it up, including the regions such as the RLC. And currently the government is taking active measures to make the economy greener, which will allow a systematic transition to the circular economy. We intend to achieve a 10% share of renewable energy sources in total energy balance by 2030, and such energy should account for half of the country's capacity by 2050. The National Development Plan until 2025 was approved in September, where one of our tasks is to stimulate the introduction of the best available technologies in accordance with the OECD standards in existing industries and the development of green technologies and energy waste disposal. So we began developing a concept of low carbon development until 2050 with the aim of addressing transition risks. We're amending our energy efficiency legislation to introduce energy management systems in industrial and public sector facilities and energy audits for 800 state-owned enterprises. We have increased the share of electricity produced from renewable energy sources from almost 0 to 3% by 2020, and have set up auction pricing methodologies and standard power purchase agreements to further development of renewable energy. Yesterday, a new environment code entered into force, and it will be adopted to systematically integrate sustainable development principles into policies and programs. These are the measures to strengthen adaptation capacity, accelerate the adoption of green technologies, and adopt standards to prevent pollution and mitigate anthropogenic impacts on the environment. Well, while supporting biodiversity, we're also developing a Green Kazakhstan national project. This is within the new national development program. The project will focus on measures to reduce air pollution, support effective waste management, enhance eco-education, and improve environmental culture. This transition is difficult tasks. Many shifts in energy generation sources will have a significant effect on employment and regional development. We will need to plan for alternative sources of revenue growth. So we are aware that we must accelerate in this direction, but at the same time, such a transition should be gradual, since it is a sensitive issue for all parties. First of all, for financially, for population, government, and businesses. Well, so from one side, we strive for greener economy. From the other side, budget capabilities are limited. That is why it is very vital, very important to develop other sources of financing. So green private financing is necessary. And we need to seize the opportunities to lower emissions as part of the stimulus investment destined to lower climate change and diseases rise impacts. This can provide a more resilient recovery today and a greener growth in the near future. And of course, at the same time, we must not leave our comparative advantages like natural resources. It would be impractical not to develop our basic economic spheres like oil and gas and minerals. But with their deepest processing must be done. So what we will solve by deep processing and deep recycling is that we will increase our added value, raise our efficiency and experience, and most importantly, save the ecology for future generations. And related areas as green finance market and energy market will be developed as alternatives. So we know the reality, and we are at the beginning of the path. This work requires a long-term approach, and we are starting now to better be prepared to address risks and manage trade-offs, avoiding unsustainable growth ways and supporting our long-term ambition. We understand that this is a long and difficult path, and this will require joint work with the private sector, and we need to cooperate closely with the world community. So I'm convinced this forum serves as an important step to this fundamental common target, and I would like to express my gratitude to organizers of this forum and for inviting the Minister of National Economy. Thank you.
Да, Я благодарю господина Куантырова, и, ну, на самом деле мы находимся...
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuantyrov. Yes, we are at the very beginning of a very long and difficult path. You're absolutely correct. I would like now to give the floor to Aidar Kazybayev. Aidar, the Green Finance Center, what role does it play in enabling Kazakhstan's transition to carbon neutrality? And what prospects you see for green capital and green investment development in Kazakhstan? Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like to thank all the speakers for their participation in our Green Growth Forum. Our session is just starting, and today and tomorrow, over a two-day period, we have plans to discuss pretty much all the issues on the agenda, such as how Kazakhstan can reach carbon neutrality, what tools can be applied towards reaching that end. And tomorrow, we will talk about environmental education. We will share best practices from large companies who already have introduced or are introducing standards for minimizing the carbon footprint. I would like to thank also Mr. Majun from the Beijing University in the support of the Green Finance Center. We now have become a regional office for the BRI initiative, Belt and Road Initiative for Central Asia. And our objective here is to help green finance grow and in rolling out and introducing green finance and green funding principles and standards throughout Central Asia. We are drafting a statement on behalf of the center where we will commit to the ideas and ideals of sustainable development. We work with the AIFC, with the AIX, with the stock exchange of the AIFC. We also work with the AIFC court and with the International Arbitration Center. The AIFC and all of its structures and all of its bodies will adopt our standards towards sustainable development and green finance and green funding, and they will put priority on that in all of the activities here at the AFC. As Alibek absolutely correct, yesterday our new environmental code was introduced and it came into force. Now, for the first time, we have a legal definition for green finance, for green investment, for green taxonomy, which will enable the growth of the green finance market and green project market. When we began our operations 3 years ago, we didn't have a legal framework to underpin our activities. So inside here, the AFC, we had to adopt our internal regulations in order to enable us to launch green bonds. Last year, we issued our first green bonds. Now we are expanding our lineup of green finance instruments. You know, environmental considerations are very much connected with social issues. We're looking at different types of green bonds, all the tools that will be necessary to support Kazakhstan's sustainable long-term and carbon neutral development. Also, with support from the Ministry of National Economy, we also made changes to our business development roadmap 2025, where we introduced subsidies for green green loans, and what Madam Kitamori also mentioned that you know, state support as subsidies for green finance is probably the most important tool to underpin Kazakhstan's transition to sustainable development. Because without green subsidies, it will be way nigh impossible. And our role here at the center is to help the government of Kazakhstan. We will not be using government money, but our job, our objective is to set up the enabling conditions for the market players to go for green finance and for green projects. Recently, we launched with MasterCard the so-called green payback cashback project, whereby if you spend money on green products or on green services, you get a certain amount of cashback And I think that will motivate consumers and to spend money on green products and green services, and that will also change consumer behavior. We also take an active part in the rollout of a carbon tax in Kazakhstan to see what kind of implication that will have on industry in Kazakhstan. As for ESG standards, so we will have discussions here with the Ministry of Economy of Kazakhstan so that ESG standards can be offset and can be deducted, will be tax deductible in order to alleviate the burden, the financial burden on companies of Kazakhstan. As for quota trading, carbon quota trading, we see that there is a huge potential here as a mechanism to attract funding. And here we would like to eyeball international experience in quota trading. So we believe that should be a very interesting game that all the market participants should be mindful of, including even citizens. That's why in terms of quota trading, we stand ready to cooperate with the OECD in borrowing the best international experience, and the AIFC can be a platform where we can test out all those different approaches. And in conclusion, the adoption of the environmental code also pointed out the need for us to have lawyers trained in environmental law. We're setting up an advisory board on environmental law, where we would like to study environmental law practices from other countries, what kind of legal motivations can be introduced through environmental law. The fact that we have speakers from UNICASE who are also our partners, we believe through partnership with them, we will be able to develop the necessary body of law, environmental law, to underpin carbon neutrality and quota trading. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Aidar. And now I would like to give the floor to another partner, UNICASE, Zhanar Abdullayeva. How our mining companies, oil and gas companies, how they can and should transform their businesses in order to reach carbon neutrality, and what role will the new environmental code play there?
Thank you very much, Aidar, for mentioning the major importance of legislative changes. As you said, the new Kazakhstan Environmental Code came into effect yesterday with the aim to basically change and shifting the whole perspective of how the environmental protection has used to be seen by the government. The environmental code is planning to change the whole mindset of the society. It's hard to briefly describe the whole sort of exhaustive legislative document, but I will try to provide sort of a basic overviews. The basic environmental principles that have been codified within the core code, as you can see on your screen, there are several of them: the precautionary principle, the prevention and control principle, the polluter pays principle, which pretty much we're delighted to see that principles extended more and requires from the polluter to restore the damage that has been caused to the environment, which is in relation to the companies, oil and gas companies in particular, for example. It makes them transfer a certain amount of money towards the project that will provide green nature, green agenda. The new terminology has been introduced, as has already been said by other speakers within the code. The whole perception, the whole concept of waste has been a bit shifted. The latest environmental code replaced the concept of temporary storage of waste with the waste accumulation, which pretty much basically means that it shouldn't be just one waste, a temporary storage of waste. The storage of waste, accumulation of waste, shall be done at the facility itself and then transported or recovered, disposed at the facility and at the disposal center. The waste management technology has been introduced, which is incorporated with the enactment of the code, which will reduce accumulation of the waste, as it will transform the energy from primary waste, and it would transform it directly to the general grid, reminding the renewable energy sources, renewable energy projects. The concept of the best available technique is one of the new legislation focuses. Basically, the legislation imposes the implementation of the best available techniques in the process of operating within industry that affect the environment of the countries. It is expected that around 50 largest companies that account for 80% of emissions in Kazakhstan will replace their old technology with the new, with the best available ones by the year 2025. We all hope to see that happening. The companies that will delay implementation of the best available techniques will be, the fines for the pollution emission will be increased, and that money will go to basically harmonize the environment. Another impact of the code is that one of the changes is the mandatory conduction of the environmental impact assessment. The companies has been divided by categories, and the category 1 companies are obliged to undertake the mandatory environmental impact assessment. The whole procedure has been changed with the new procedure has been introduced with the code. And we as lawyers, as consultants, I really hope that the detailed procedures that has now been introduced by the new code will impact greatly on the green finance, on the green projects, on the whole restoration of the Kazakhstan environment. On a conceptual level, the new environmental code reflects simultaneously the international obligations of Kazakhstan to minimize the overall impact on the environment. It affects the environmental needs of the local society. It obviously affects the try to affect the economic perspective, the necessity to shift the economic perspective towards a longer planning, careful consideration to the environment. The practical implementation, although, of the new requirements will undoubtedly depend on the joint cooperation of all players on the market. It will be challenging. It will involve considerable period of time to adapt to the sort of integrate these principles in the new reality. At present, the reality in Kazakhstan is that certain challenging concepts exist. To reach the ambitious goal of Kazakhstan for the carbon neutrality, we obviously need a considerable amount of international investment. Obviously, for that, as my colleague has already said, the sort of transparent and very detailed fiscal strategy is required. So all of these factors supposed to be taken into account, and we do hope that the new rules and regulations will change Kazakhstan and will help Kazakhstan with the development of their sort of user-friendly environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Zhanar. Сейчас у нас, уважаемые зрители, есть некоторые ограничения по времени.
Dear participants, because we are limited in time, we have only one question. We have a question to Alibek Kuantyrov, the Ministry of Mental Economy. So will it lead to the changes in the state programs, the transition to the green economy, and everything that is connected with that, please? Thank you very much, Gaziz. It's a very interesting question. You know, starting from February, we adopted a new program for state development that includes the national strategy up to 2025. So the system of state planning has several levels. The upper level is the strategy up to 2050. Back then, in 2012, ambitious goals were set up, in particular connected with the green economy. The share of alternative resources of energy was about 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. And then they divided this strategy into the development plan of Kazakhstan up to 2020. Actually, it was adopted before. Then it was adopted up to 2025. And it included the strategy up to 2050 and new obligations of Kazakhstan that we adopted for ourselves as the voluntary basis in the framework of our future entry into OECD. They have very high standards, both environmental and others, in total, that are connected with sustainable development and sustainable development goals. And these sustainable development goals after 2016 started to be introduced very actively in the state planning system. And what I mean, these external obligations are the part of the state planning, and now it was in the plan up to 2020, and now these indicators, sustainable development goals, and they are included in the national projects that are not just connected with the environment, but also the economy. Just yesterday, the president adopted the list of 10 national programs, projects. They will be developed further, and then these indicators will be included in the development plan. Before, they were the strategic plans of state bodies. Now they are the strategic plans of the state. And all these 17 sustainable development goals and additional standards of OECD will be decomposed. There will be a lot of them, but they will include about 10 indicators in every state body, for example, not only the ministry, not only the government, but also we're talking about the national companies and the state bodies that are not subject to, that are independent from the government, but they are subject to the president. They will include it, and it should be implemented. We record everything, and actually it's included in the state planning, and after that it will be developed further and deeper. And then as soon as it's adopted, it will be developed further, and then it will be implemented. Taking into consideration all of this, we are achieving the big objective and additional tasks that are set by the president, for example, decarbonization by 2060. So the whole objective will be focused on the sustainable development of the country. Thank you. Thank you. I have another question to Zhanar Abdullayeva. What are the standards that are developed and introduced in oil and gas enterprises of Kazakhstan to decrease the carbon footprint? You know, it's early to speak about the standards that are introduced. In principle, the requirements of the code are new, and as for the standards, they conduct the general audit of oil and gas companies in order to identify what kind of technologies there should be to be introduced in order to transfer to another standard, in order to become the company that follow the requirements of environmental code, both domestic and international. So this is the main issue, and in parallel, we all see and hear about it in mass media, for example. Very often, oil and gas companies are started to invest into green economy projects. It's one of the benefits for the agenda that we all try to discuss today. Thank you very much, Zhanar. Dear participants, we are wrapping up our session. Thank you very much that you listening to us. Thank you for all interesting presentations. Because we are limited in time. If you ask the questions in written format, you will receive the answers in written form via emails. Thank you very much. I think we will achieve our objectives. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.